We're going to do the kind of things that will make this country stronger, and everyone will see themselves in that budget. So that's why I would expect the opposition parties to be supportive, because there is something for every Canadian in that budget. This is a budget that talks to everyday Canadian, the workers that you've seen here, the member of our armed forces, the innovators, the entrepreneurs, the families in Canada, and that's the kind of budget we need to meet the moment. And tomorrow, as Canadians, will meet the moment.
Something for everybody. We shall see. Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne there. He was picking up new shoes at the Boulet factory in Saint-Tite, as finance ministers do. They get new shoes before a budget. Let's now head over to Vassy Kapelos, the wonderful host of the Vassy Kapelos Show, which airs right after this one. Hi, Vassy. Welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, listen, I know you've been all over this on your show. You've been speaking to the government. You've been speaking to the opposition parties. As you see it here on your Super Bowl day, budget day for you, how do you think the day plays out?
I don't know, and that's what's kind of making it the most exciting version of a Super Bowl, I think. And I say I don't know because unlike most budgets I've covered, the majority of it appears not to have been leaked. They've made some announcements in the lead up to the budget, but they've been fairly minor in scale, and they don't really give us an indication of how they intend to kind of, I guess, deliver on the messaging that they've brought forth, which is this is the generational budget of our time, massive levels of investment, aka spending. So all of those very significant details have yet to be filled in. So I feel as though there is actually a considerable amount of mystery about what this thing really looks like, which makes it, I think, more interesting.
Well, I'm happy you brought that up, because I mentioned during the 9 o'clock hour, right? Few, if any, leaks, and I think it goes to the corporate boardroom chops of Mark Carney. Leaks are not acceptable in the corporate world for things like this. So I do also find it very interesting that we have hardly any information so far. So let's talk about the opposition parties and the lines that they've drawn in the sand here. How tough are those lines? How set are those lines?
I think there are lines that you would expect from opposition parties that are big in size. So in particular from the Conservatives, the official opposition, traditionally it's very rare that you're going to see the official opposition support something as significant for the government as the budget. And they have spelled out a very specific list of demands that includes things that the government isn't going to meet. And I would primarily identify the size of the deficit, right? So the Conservatives want it capped at $42 billion. Just on the spending, we know they've already announced meeting defense, all that kind of stuff. There's no way that it's going to be $42 billion. And you can debate the merits of it one way or the other, but I don't see that condition being met. So they've set it up so that it's, easy to say, hey, they didn't meet these things that we said would constitute a good budget, and so we're going to vote against it. It gets a little bit more, again, interesting and dynamic as you go down the list of opposition parties. So the Bloc as well, at the election was saying we're going to give the government a year. Essentially, we won't vote them down in confidence for a year. Then a month ago, the leader of the party steps up to the mic outside the House of Commons and goes, I've seen nothing so far that would lead me to support this budget, which made us think unequivocally he was going to vote against it. Then a couple weeks ago, he issues his own set of 6 demands, including things that seem like the government would view them as unaffordable, primarily boosting OAS for 65 to 67-year-olds here, but seems less stuck to the idea that he won't support it. It felt as though there's a bit more wiggle room, not a ton, but a bit more. And so that one is hard to know for sure. They seem to be leaning to a no vote, but you never know. And then finally, we conclude with the NDP, which is where, just like the past few years, this thing may end up going, right? Depending on New Democrats to either abstain or actually vote for the budget in order for it to pass. The government needs to secure 3 votes. The caucus is 7 for the NDP. I will say this is where even more drama could happen because that caucus is not united. They're pretty disparate. We don't know how much power the interim leader can actually exercise over them. So he may say, hey, we're going to abstain, or we're going to vote against it, or we're going to vote for it. And they could do something very different, which is where the possibility of an election really comes in.
Do you see there could be chaos today and we tumble into a Christmas time election? That's on the table for you.
Yeah, it's on the table. I mean, it's like on the outer edges of the table, barely on the placemat at this point, because I do really believe, I'm sure you have a sense, and everyone listening, that you couldn't go anywhere in your real life outside of, the Ottawa bubble and someone say, like, you know what I've really been talking about? Let's get back to the polls. Like, it just feels crazy, right? But stranger things have happened. There are historical examples here in Canada of, like, quote unquote mistakes where they thought they had the votes and it didn't happen. So I think the possibility exists very, very, very minimally at the margins, but in a minority, you never know. And we will see some of that drama play out today. We're going to be interviewing live on TV, like the leader of the NDP, the Conservative House leader. So we'll know where people are positioning pretty soon after this budget. And if you hear from the NDP anything but we're voting against it, I think that you can breathe a sigh of relief around the possibility of an election. They'll likely support it. But if they come out today and say, I don't think we can support this thing, we're in a whole new ballgame.
Can I throw one other angle? We're with Vassy Kapelos. We're talking about today's federal budget. What about this wild card? Like, do the Liberals, do they kind of sort of say to themselves, no, let's go. This is our chance. Let's blame another party. Let's get a majority, and maybe the economic news will only get worse over the next little while. Let's go. Could it be up to them at the end of the day?
I think you've been talking to the same Liberal MPs that I have, because I think I don't think there's consensus in the party about going to the polls. I think they know, they can acknowledge that Canadians don't want it. But even when Canadians blame someone or something for an election and don't want the election, rarely does that end up being the ballot box question. And do those parties end up paying, right? So I think the Liberals do see, if any party sees opportunity right now, it is the Liberals. They have only a handful of seats in order to clinch a majority, which would greatly aid them, obviously, in trying to or attempting to deliver on an agenda they put forth. I think they see the least risk, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And that doesn't mean, as we've witnessed over the past year and a half, that things can't change on a dime. So I don't know. They may feel that way now. It might be a different story if it happens.
And I think, adding to the intrigue is just all of the silence over what's actually in the budget, right? So you wonder what they're cooking at this hour. Vassy, one more question here about the budget itself, and the talk about how they're dividing up the spending. Operational versus investments. Some people say, hey, you can't actually do that. Some people are saying, oh, no, that's actually quite the fine way to actually get down to solving Canada's budget woes. How do you view it here? In the conversations you've had across the political spectrum, how do you view that question?
Well, a couple of different ways. First of all, look, I understand that they're going to classify things that they think will generate a return on investment on the capital side of things. And ultimately, that's what we should hope for all government spending, that it does generate a return on investment. Unfortunately, I think over the past number of decades, you and I and everyone listening could point to a number of examples where that simply was not the case, right? I understand they're trying to frame it as investment versus income redistribution, which was a big part of sort of the brand of the previous government. But delivering on that is a different story. So I sort of approach it with an eye towards skepticism in that vein. And then additionally, I understand they're also saying, like, your mortgage isn't the same type of debt load as your credit card debt. Sure. But at the end of the day, when I'm doing my household budget, it's all debt to me. And it all has to be paid off eventually. So I think they can present it in a certain way. And I understand that the impetus for doing so. But it's also my job, for example, tonight to be able to tell Canadians, well, the actual deficit is like, sure, they've got an operating deficit, but there's also like $60 billion of additional spending, et cetera, whatever it ends up being. And this is the other number that we're used to seeing, because ultimately, I'm not assigning intent, but you can imagine a situation where a government of any political stripe would take the opportunity to kind of make those numbers as opaque as possible. And in particular at a time where spending may be at a record level, I think it's important that there is that level of transparency for Canadians.
Vassy, we'll be watching your coverage on CTV News. I'd say maybe the most consequential budget in a long, long time.
We shall see.
Thank you for joining us. Listen, I got to say, you are the Yoshinobu Yamamoto of CTV News. You pitch Game 6.
I'll take it.
You pitch Game 7. You're always there, and you crush it, Vassy.
You made my day. Thank you.
Come back real soon. That's Vassy Kapelos.
I hope to.
Host of the Vassy Kapelos Show.
I'm Dylan Playfair.
And I'm Tyler Smith.
We're putting loneliness in the penalty box by talking to some of our favorite athletes about the importance of friendship.
This is Bromance.
Bromance is brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers, proudly Canadian-owned and operated. Charm has been part of your love stories and bromances for over 50 years. And you can find Bromance on the iHeartRadio network or wherever you get your podcasts.